Well, I said, I'll see how the kettle feels and try to get
Good afternoon and welcome to a Oak Harbor City Council workshop. I think this is a regular workshop date. Today is February 27th. It is 2 p.m. and I'd like to call the meeting to order at this time. We'll go around the table and introduce ourselves to those that are watching, maybe that haven't met us, and there'll be some staff, I think, that'll join us, and we'll let them introduce themselves when they do. I am Oak Harbor Mayor Bob Severance.
Bill Larson, City Council Member.
Rick Almberg, City Council Member.
Joel Servadius, City Council.
Blaine Milborn, City Administrator.
Beth Munns, Mayor Pro Tem.
Erica Wassinger, City Council.
Thank you.
If I will, Mayor, we'll have to leave at 3:30, so if I step out at that time, one of those times when I have to go pick up the kids from school.
Okay. I think that we may have another counselor join us. We know that Councilor Wiesner is not going to be here today, so we'll start the meeting, and I'd like to start by saying that staff has asked to change the agenda so that the city administrator report, which was scheduled to be first on our agenda today, will be moved to after the Public Works Windjammer Park interpretive art pieces are discussed. So it will be moved to the end of the meeting, and I think Blaine has suggested that if there is additional time, even more than the 15 minutes that were scheduled, then we can talk about those at that time. So let's go ahead and get started then with the development services.
Mayor, question?
Oh, yes.
Just curious then, looking at the agenda and looking at the audience, might it make sense to bring the park interpretive pieces to the forefront? Can we do that?
Sure.
Assuming that's why you're sitting here.
Unless
you want to hang out for an hour and a half or 2.5 hours.
Certainly open to that. So you're suggesting then we take the Public Works item number A, Windjammer Park interpretive art pieces to the front.
Please, I think so, if that works.
Is staff okay with that?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's do it. We have our Public Works Director, Gabby Rosen, and Brett Arvidsson.
Brett's going to give this presentation.
Okay. From our engineering department, Brett.
Good afternoon. I'm Brett Arvidsson from the Public Works Department. I'm also the project manager for the clean water facility. And today we want to talk about interpretive art at Windjammer Park. This is actually the piece that we're interested in. There's also another accompanying piece. I just want to give you a preview of what we're talking about, and we'll kind of start telling the story. As you all know, that Windjammer Park's under construction. We started off in 2016 with the Windjammer integration plan. This is the basis for all the work that we've done today. And that was also a public process where we brought the community in to create the vision for the park. And I think they've been very successful at that. And that vision encompassed both the physical facilities, the kitchens, the playgrounds, and whatever, but also the feel of the park. We wanted to accomplish certain goals in the park, and that's real important as we move forward. This plan was adopted by City Council, and it's available on our project website. This is just our major graphic from that. It's becoming a little obsolete because we're building a lot of that now. But anyway, art was always under consideration in Windjammer Park. It's been a part of Windjammer historically. We have many pieces out there now, and we certainly anticipate putting more in. But we wanted to make sure as we move forward that the art would fit in with what we're trying to do in the park. So in 2017, the project team works with the Arts Commission to include art into the project design. We wanted to make sure that we accommodated art, make sure we were able to support it with the infrastructure, we came up with criteria and locations for public art, which are actually built into the park design. But we actually did not have any specific art pieces or items in it. We just said we did do that in the future, but we did actually accommodate it. We did this through a collaborative charrette with represents the Art Commission. We established goals for artwork. Back to our Windjammer park plan, we tried to make sure the themes and between the art and design effort were the same, so we didn't want to have conflicts out there. We did propose preliminary locations for our work. I did hand out a sheet. That's where we have 17 potential locations that we can support art at the site, at the park and the Phase 1 expansion. We also talked about materiality, which is materials we're using out there. We want to be consistent, so we don't want to put something out there that's not suitable for the environment, but also fits in with the architecture and the landscaping and all that type of thing. We also, from the landscape architects and the architect's point of view, is we actually talked about sight lines and scale of these facilities. So we don't want something so huge that it overwhelms the park, but we also want something that can be appreciated. I can barely read my slide up here. And we also dealt with the practical items. You know, these things need lights, they need power, water, whatever. So we want to make sure the infrastructure is available. Access is a big issue. So those locations were set up for that type of idea. When we talk about what we want in the park, coming out of the integration plan and what we talked about is we want these themes to be very important. One is wind. We all know the wind here in Oak Harbor, and it comes right off the harbor there, so that's a major design element in the park and in our experience of the park. Water, of course, we're on the harbor. People walk the waterfront. We're doing a clean water facility there, so anything with water was a major theme involved with it. For us as a city, you know, we're spending a big investment in the park and in the clean water facility, so environmental benefits and education are part of it, especially around the areas of our interpretive center. Native vegetation, of course, the Gary Oaks, and also Oak Harbor history. We have 2,000 years of history, and this project has developed a real appreciation for that. Again, this is the site plan that we talked about, and so we have these sites pretty well identified. It's not to say they're cast in stone, but we think they're very, in terms of visibility and usability, they're extremely useful. This is some of our existing art out there, and that shows our new facility. And we have a very beautiful location, and that's actually been cleaning up. I always like that picture. Well, now, as I said, we don't have any specific plans for art at this point. We wanted to make sure we have the ability to do that, but we know, as I said, we have many existing and pieces and not minus in the park, and we have the infrastructure available. But we always saw the Arts Commission as the primary vehicle for bringing art into the park. That's what they do. But we also felt that as a group and part of our project is public education, and public education art go hand in hand. So we wanted to make sure we follow through with that. Also, like I say, we want to make sure that we've done a major facility, and also what we're seeing in the harbor is we want to make sure that association stays strong. So anyway, we did, with active construction, frankly, we didn't have a lot of time to be thinking about art, you know, and we haven't really pursued the process that very much. In this current budget year, we do have budget for environmental education and interpretive facilities. That's built in for our new facility. And all of a sudden, in a couple weeks ago, we had two pieces that came available that would fill the education and interpretive goals. And so we decided to, maybe this is a chance to take advantage of an opportunity. So these statues became available. One is an orca. This is one view of it. Another view of it. The artist is a guy named Craig Brightbush, right back. Yeah. And he's actually from the Port Townsend area, but he lives over in Falls City now. But he does quite a bit of stone carving, and we were quite impressed by what we're seeing there. This, we also have a second statue that's potential is a statue of the Chinook. And in our water quality world, Chinook and orcas go together. The southern paws only eat Chinook. They're kind of like my grandfather. They don't like silvers. So that's to us a major story as I go through it, but here's another view of it. So we thought this is a great opportunity to talk about what we want to do in the park and what we're doing at the clean water facility, and talk about why we were excited. Like I say, orca and salmon are traditional symbols of our Puget Sound heritage. Something it can be a bit trite at times, but it's very real to us. To us personally, is I've talked about nutrient standards at the last couple of council meetings, and the nutrient standards in the Puget Sound are being driven by recovery of the salmon and the orcas. So for us in our water quality world, this is what we're doing, and I think it's something we need to take pride in. Our new clean water facility is providing water quality improvements to Penn Cove and the Saratoga Passage. I presented some numbers last time. What we're doing today is real in terms of benefits. I've been following through on it, and it's pretty impressive, and we're doing it today. I'm not waiting for somebody to tell us to do it. So hopefully, our clean water facility will encourage the orcas to thrive in the Saratoga Passage. They've historically been here. You see them every once in a while. I'd just like to see more, and not Stonewood. So anyway, we see these two pieces reflecting our efforts to build the clean water facility, what we're trying to do here. For me personally, as an engineer, the guy uses a column of basalt for his carvings, but it's also, when we were building a project 3 years ago, we were dealing with erratics, and I was busting them up. So for me as a civil engineer, breaking up rocks is kind of fun too. So I don't usually carve them too much, so I was kind of enjoying that. Also, I think I presented sometimes the artifacts that we found in the site. We found many stone axe heads and that type of thing. And people have been carving stone in our park for 2,000 years. We cited one of those carvings I showed back last fall. We dated back to 2,000 years ago. So this is also a part of our heritage. The materials are rock, and they can withstand the area very well. And from an aesthetic point of view, the color, the hue, the shades, and the sides are all very aesthetically matching what we are trying to do at the park. So we kind of felt this was a good fit for us. So anyway, we'd like to move ahead with acquiring the statues. We'll probably begin discussions to purchase the pieces. There's 2 of them available. We're probably going to try to keep it less than $30,000, and we will be funding that from the Interpretive Center budget. Like I say, the installation cost, the guy actually installs himself, so we'll be buying a piece of concrete pad, so there's a whole lot of money in the installation and the other infrastructures there. And we will also coordinate this activity with the Arts Commission. I think the person that actually put us onto the statues on the Arts Commission, so Therese here. And so I have to give her credit for tracking this one down. And we do think that this is an educational opportunity for us. And I have one more story from the clean water facility. When we started doing the splash park, our theme was a shipwreck. And so I got with the design team, and everybody says, well, if I'm having a shipwreck, I want it to look like this. And this is actually a Turner picture, which is in the Boston Museum. And it's a pretty famous picture. And I was actually out there looking today, and I hadn't seen this picture for about a year. I looked at it and I said, oh my God, our splash park actually looks like this. So, questions?
Okay, council? Any questions? Yes, Joe.
A brief question. So you think 30,000 or less for both of the pieces?
That's what I'm hoping for.
And I'm just curious, the metal plate, how is that? I'm assuming that's
It's
stabilizing.
basically a flange, and we'll when we build the pad, we'll put some anchor bolts into it.
But do we know, or maybe Treese knows, I'm just curious, how is that attached to the columnar of basalt?
It's pinned and
Pinned in.
not going away, like belongs to this stone now.
Councilor Larson.
Yeah, Brett, thanks. I think these pieces are great. I think they do tie in with so many of the things that you were talking about, not only the fact that they're going to last, I mean, they're made of stone, but they really do as far as reflect what our values are, what we're concerned with as we move forward with this. So I think this is a great project to pursue. I was walking, on a separate note, I was walking the waterfront trail with my kids this weekend. They're very excited about the shipwreck because things are really starting to take shape down there. And then I said, well, let's go look at the founder statue. You know, 'cause, and we went, and right in the middle of it was a giant orange cone. So I don't know if you guys know what's going on down there. Is there a
We
problem?
ran a conduit over there. We actually ran power to it.
Okay, so I was like, because I was like, here's this beautiful statue and one of the largest orange cones I had ever seen. And my kid's like, what's that? Is that a part of it? I was like, no, it's not. But so I was just curious as to what was happening.
The founder statue came in. We didn't have a way to power it, so we actually ran a conduit from the kitchen over to it.
Okay. And is that still there?
I haven't looked at it lately.
Okay.
We'll get it taken care of.
Thank you.
I assume it's going away, though.
Yeah, I will now.
Mayor Brooks.
Thank you, Mayor. Will these pieces also need a light on it?
Probably, but we have the infrastructure
Okay.
for that. Like I say, that's right in our lighting. Yeah. So these locations have lighting or power available.
Okay.
That was part of the initial evaluation of big sites.
Councilor Holmberg.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, since the humanoid likes to leave footprints in perpetuity, these are probably going to be the best footprints that this city will leave in the year 25.
My daughter was kid. I sent a picture to my daughter, and she was a big supporter of it. And she says, "Well, in 2,000 years, they're going to dig it up, and they're going to wonder what you were doing there."
Yeah. And hopefully the salmon will still be here.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Okay. Thank you very much. Great presentation. So we will now move to the Development Services section. Starting with A, 2019 Comprehensive Plan docket. Our Development Services Director, Mr. Steve Powers, and our Senior Planner, Kat Kamak.
Thanks, Mayor. Kat Kamak, Senior Planner, going through our annual process of adopting the docket and amending the comprehensive plan. As you are all aware, the state allows us to amend our comprehensive plan only once a year, so we have this lengthy process where we go through a docket adoption process and then work on the amendments all year. This year, the docket has about 4 items, and most of them are carryovers from 2018 because we're continuing to work on them. Some of them, the scope is large enough that they actually span more than 1 year. So what we have moving forward for the 2019 docket is the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan. We've been working on it for more than a year now. We've already discussed the major components of what we're amending. The council looked at the goals and the policies and also the 6-year implementation plan. It's just a matter of pulling the document together, which we're working on right now. So I'm hoping that we move the plan in the first quarter to the City Council and Planning Commission for review and approval, and then what's approved will later get adopted in the comprehensive plan as a section under the parks. We also have economic development element open. Now this has been a topic that's been kind of open for the last year or so. We've discussed the goals and policies within this element, and they seem to be okay, but we're still kind of keeping it open with the idea that there may be some new synergy created with the Chamber of Commerce and the Main Street Association working with the city. So we've kept the element open for 2019 just in case we have to consider any policy changes. I'm not anticipating any big changes, but nevertheless, we'll just have it open. The housing element, this has been a hot topic for more than a year now. We have this, this was on the 2018 docket as well. We looked at the plan, the goals and policies, discussed it with the Planning Commission. Most of what we want to address, or what the city sees as primary issues in housing, is already addressed in most of the goals and policies within the plan. So trying to meddle with the goals and policies, I don't think will actually result in anything. What we're thinking more of is maybe an implementation plan of sorts. And, you know, how do we want to achieve some of the goals and policies that we have in there? And that's maybe a discussion that we can have this year. So we have that element open. And then, of course, the capital improvements plan, we update the plan every year. We've made tweaks every year. We have some new tools that we incorporated this past year, and we hope to further refine that this year. So we have that as well tracking. So those are the 4 items that are tracking on the docket. And the Planning Commission has taken a look at it. They've held a public hearing on it in January, and have made a recommendation to the City Council. We'll bring it forward to the council at the March 19th meeting. Just thought we'll give you a preview, and if you have any questions, we can try and chat about it here. If not, you'll see it at the March 19th meeting. So with that, I'll just open up for questions and discussion.
No questions? Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, CAC. We will then move on to item B, which is Shoreline Master Program 2019-2020 update. We have our senior planner, Dennis Lefebvre, joining us.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, good afternoon. As with any big effort that Development Services undertakes, it's kind of nice to give you folks a heads up as to what our approach is and basically why we're doing this effort. And some of you might be interested and very knowledgeable on our last update for the Shoreline Master Program. Some of you might have some questions or like some framework as to why we're undertaking this effort. So I'm going to be basing my kind of high-level approach this afternoon on what the Shoreline Management Act is, some of the state findings that the legislature provided, look at a few of the building blocks that create some of the framework for the SMA, look at how the city of Oak Harbor has responded to the requirements of the Shoreline Management Act. Also address what we're looking at as far as our periodic review, our update process for this coming year and a half. And then also what our anticipated time frame is for this effort. So back in 1971, the state voters approved a referendum that prompted the legislature to create the Shoreline Management Act. And part of the act, the legislature found that there is a clear and urgent demand for a planned, rational, and concerted effort jointly performed by federal, state, and local governments to prevent the inherent harm in an uncoordinated and piecemeal development of the state's shorelines. That, in a nutshell, is the purpose of the act. Some of the other findings that the legislature has provided is that the shorelines are among the most valuable and fragile of the state's resources, and also that the interest of all the people shall be paramount in the management of shorelines of statewide significance. So right there, that kind of sets the precedent for what the act is all about, is to make sure that we are good stewards of our shorelines. There are additional findings. The act itself is codified in RCW 90.58. In case you're interested and want some evening reading, you can take a look at that and enlighten yourself on some of the other findings. But basically, the shoreline jurisdiction, as codified in the act itself, deals with the Pacific Coast, the Hood Canal, certain Puget Sound shorelines, rivers and streams of 20 cubic feet per second mean annual flow, lakes of greater than 20 acres. We in Oak Harbor do not have rivers and streams or the lakes that classify under the jurisdiction for the SMA. Also, biological wetlands and river deltas connected to these water bodies. And the key one for us is the upland areas 200 feet landward of the ordinary high water mark. The Department of Ecology has been tasked with the administration of the Shoreline Management Act. And as the vehicle to implement the act, the Shoreline Master Program was created. There are specific guidelines in the act that give us direction on how to prepare the Shoreline Master Program and what we need to address and maintain conformance with the act. All counties in the state are required to prepare a Shoreline Master Program, and over 250 towns and cities are required also to prepare a Shoreline Master Program. What the Shoreline Master Program does is essentially creates a land use document for all jurisdiction within the 200 feet of the ordinary high water mark. It establishes policies and development regulations, which is fairly unique to a planning document. But we must address both of those issues in that document. And of also key note, the Shoreline Management Act, which is a fairly statewide comprehensive planning act, was done 20 years before the Growth Management Act. Nearly 50 years it's been in establishment now, so it's quite a long-standing act for the state of Washington. Some of the key building blocks for the act itself, and I'll just brief these for you. It's encouragement of water-dependent uses. They also want to prevent damage to the natural environment, create uses that are unique or dependent upon our key shoreline issues. Obviously, protection of the shoreline natural resources is a key element. And also another key building block to the act is that we promote and maintain public access to our shorelines. So what has the City of Oak Harbor done to stay in conformance with the act? Well, the first 26 years of the act, we basically operated under Island County's Shoreline Master Program. Logistically, I don't know how that worked out so well, but in 1998, the city adopted their first Shoreline Master Program and underwent a multi-year effort in beginning, I think, 2011 to update and create our current Shoreline Master Program. Some of the key tasks that were included in that update, which involved a lot of rule and procedural changes to the act prior to our most recent SMP, included an extensive public participation program, an inventory and characterization, cumulative impact analysis, obviously the development of policy and regulations, the inclusion of a restoration plan, and all of these elements need to be consistent and in conformance with the act. I'm not going to drill down to any one of these. There will be subsequent presentations that I'll be making which will deal with these probably more specifically as we go along this entire effort. Also, briefly identifying what we have as far as our shorelines. We have about 13 miles of shoreline. As you can imagine, 70% of that is in federal ownership, primarily around Crescent Harbor and Mailer Point, obviously with the Navy. We have 17% ownership privately, and about 13% is owned by the city. We've established 7 shoreline designations through a previous effort. I'd like to add that these shoreline designations, for the most part, are prescribed in the Act as far as being specific classifications for what type of uses and designations we establish in our shoreline. We did establish 2 that are somewhat unique, one being the maritime, which is the red area encompassing primarily the marina, and then the residential bluff conservancy, which deals with that area to the west of our shoreline. Also, as you can imagine, with all of the agencies that have interest along the shoreline, regulation and permitting of anything in the shoreline is very complicated due to the number of federal agencies, state agencies, city interests, environmental interests, as well as private property owner are all involved. So it's a very complicated network of permitting along the shoreline. So what is this periodic review basically going to entail for us? The WAC 173-26090 says that we need to review and, if necessary, revise our master program. It sets out a mandated deadline of June 30th, 2020 for us to have it completed and approved locally, which gives us a little bit of a heads up here. So we're starting early in the process, and we're comfortable with that time frame. And yes, it does represent another state mandate, similar to low impact development, critical areas ordinance, and our NPDES permit phase 2 requirements. But the one caveat about this effort is there will be some funding available to the city to do this effort. It's not a great amount, but for our population, the legislature will be approving about $20,000 for our effort in this update. The basic steps that we're going to engage in this review is to essentially look at what changes have been made to the Act since our last document, which was 2013. There has been several changes to the Act which we'll have to incorporate. Not any of them are really huge in nature, but then DOE has provided a checklist guidance for us to follow along to make sure that we catch what rules and procedures have been incorporated since then. We want to make sure that we maintain conformance with our comprehensive plan, as well as the new development regulations that we've created through low impact development, critical areas ordinance, and anything else that might impact the shoreline land uses. And also to incorporate any new information, changed circumstances, or improved data, which is synonymous with best available science, but with the caveat that the state has issued that there's no minimum requirements to revise the plan. So we think we're consistent in conformance with all of the changes to the Act and meet their guidelines. We don't have to do a thing other than pass an ordinance saying that we're okay. But at first blush, there are going to be some changes to it. I don't think they're going to be substantive in nature. So with our time frame, we are looking at, obviously, the public participation program will run throughout this effort. We had a Planning Commission presentation last night. The workshop today, we're going to have periodic reviews also by Planning Commission and City Council, so you can stay abreast as to what kind of changes we're looking at. Staff will do a review and analysis of basically the first half of this year. We hope to have a draft scope of amendments ready by the second half of this year, so we can start reviewing that as a group in the legislative body. And then hopefully in the first 4 months of 2020, we'll take it through the legislative process and have approval a couple of months before our deadline in late June. So that's how we hope to have this work out for us. And if there are any questions at this point, Steve, did I catch anything?
I think you did a great job. Just maybe a couple of similar thoughts. From the one slide, I think the council can see that there is absolutely no more complex environment for permitting and land use regulation than the shoreline. The list of alphabet organizations is pretty long there. And so it is very challenging when we are implementing the plan. Another point is that it's a unique document because it combines policies and regulations in the same document. And you don't normally do that. Normally you have a policy document and a regulatory document, and they are separate. But this is how the state has prescribed this. Something that's important for the council to know is that we don't have final local approval authority. So unlike a comprehensive plan, when you approve the comprehensive plan, that's it. It's approved unless it's appealed. in the Shoreline Master Program, you will take an approval action, the local approval action, and then you will have to forward it on to the state, and the state then, in the form of ecology, has their own approval of it. And so if there are changes that they direct us to make, they will send it back to us, and we will need to make those changes. And that's what happened last time around. We met our deadline by the end of 2012 last time. There were some things that they wanted to have modified. By the time they got done with their process, we got it back in our hands, and then we did our work, and then the council readopted it. That took us to the end of 2013. So the big takeaway for you is that while certainly there's a lot of local decision making, we do not have sole approval of the document itself. And finally, we're starting early, as you can see, so that we have the best opportunity to work with Planning Commission, Council, and our community. And we'll do our best to keep this in your minds, but there'll be some months where you won't hear from us on it, and then we'll come back to you and talk to you about it again. And Dennis, I think, spent the last few months of 2018 getting ready for this presentation today and doing some of that preliminary work. So all told, we'll probably have around 2 years of staff time into this project. That's it for me.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Is this a dictation and we look like we're approving it, but they're going to say, no, you can't word it that way. It has to be worded this way? I mean, do we have any options or choices? Second part of it is the county doesn't have to follow the same shoreline management rules that we do. Am I correct on that? Or they also have to?
They do.
Okay.
So let me take your questions in reverse order. County is also subject to the Shoreline Management Act. They have their own SMP, and they are on the same timetable that we are. Okay. And so they have the same periodic schedule update that we have to meet, and that's prescribed in the state law. It is both prescriptive and local choice. So there's a large chunks of it that I think are fairly prescriptive, and we took care of that with our 2012 update. There are things that are left to the local choice, like uses within our different designations to some degree. We can set some of our own standards. There are some things which aren't. And to give you a good example, last time around we needed to significantly increase the language around cultural resources. In the earlier versions of those plans across the state, that was not very much emphasis placed on that. 2012 update, we had to have several pages worth of language in there. And so there are definitely things ecology will tell us this is what it is that you need to do. And then there are a pretty good handful of things where we will have local choice. But as Dennis said, we've done most of that heavy lifting. We don't expect that there will be a lot of those major changes to take place in this one. But we will certainly look for all flexibility and the opportunity to exercise local choice wherever we can.
Okay, thank you. I'd like, anytime you can give us options, would like to see those.
Absolutely, yes.
Would appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Councilor Holmberg.
Thank you, Mayor. Steve and Dennis, you are probably aware, in fact you've been CC'd. Yesterday the city administrator sent a letter to the Island County Board of Health regarding the nutrient reduction of Puget Sound. I think this is a yes or no question. Will our shoreline program here impact or have any impact at all on the enforcement of reducing human nutrients added into Puget Sound through this? Or is this just a physical, is it a regulation of physical activity on the shoreline?
If I understand the way in which you're using that question, the SMP does not have a direct relationship to the letter that Mr. Oborn sent.
Okay.
It does certainly talk about land uses adjacent to the shoreline. It certainly talks about not wanting to degrade the shoreline. But I'm not recalling any specific language in there that would say to us that we should be working to actively remove septic systems. But we'll check that, Mr. Alberg, and make sure that we get back to you.
Then
And so the whole council.
All right, and then off in a different direction with my questioning on this, when you look at that map, and I know when we went through this 2 years ago, I said, why do we have to include the Navy's property in the shoreline master plan, which is about 3 or 4 times greater than the area that we have within the city? The answer then was because that property is in the city, but it's not in the, it is in the city, but it's not for city residents to use. So why do we have to go through the regulatory expense to deal with essentially Navy property all the way out to Pawnell Point?
It's a good question, and it's one that we fielded 8 years ago when we worked on that last update. And the short answer is we're prescribed by law to do that.
Because it's in the city.
Yes. The interesting part is that we only go so far. So we were required at that time to do the inventory. In other words, what does that shoreline consist of? And that was part of what we used that grant for 8 years ago. We're required to do the characterization report, and we were required, I think, to contemplate what the cumulative impact analysis had for that area. But then that's it. So as you know, we have no regulatory authority over there. So we don't issue shoreline substantial development permits, we don't issue exemption letters, we don't do any of the nuts and bolts implementation of the plan like we would elsewhere within the city limits. So we have an obligation to show what's there, but then we stop at that point. The Navy, through the state, is encouraged to follow what's in our plan, but they have no obligation to do that. I don't think, unless Dennis has seen something to the contrary, that we will have a lot of work that we have to do this go around in that portion of our shoreline.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councilor Wasson.
I'd just like to state that I'm a small interest owner of the shoreline, if you will. So as we move forward, I've told Nikki, our city attorney, and she's gonna get back to me and make sure that there's no, issues with me. This is a legislative procedure, I understand, so it's a little bit different than some that we do, but just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of that going forward.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. We will move on to item number C, Villarreal annexation. Looks like we have CAC back.
Yes.
CAC is back.
Welcome back.
Back again. All right, Villarreal annexation. So this is a annexation request that we received early in January for property that's located on North O'Cover Road. So in this slide, this is the city limits, all the hatched areas in the city of O'Cover, and this is all in the UGA in Island County, and the properties that have requested annexation of the 3 properties here. So to get your bearings, this is O'Cover Road, Gun Club Road, Crosby is further just off the slide, and this is Goldie Road. So this is the location of the properties that have requested annexation. So when we do get a request to annex, we go through the same process, and I'll just go over that real quick. So once we get the letter, we are supposed to have a meeting, the city council is supposed to meet with the applicant within 60 days, and we've scheduled that for the March 5th meeting to consider that request. Any annexation, it's a discretionary action. It's not like if you meet criteria 1, 2, and 3, you automatically get annexed. It's entirely up to the council to decide whether you want to annex property to the city or not. And so whether you want to accept it, reject it, or geographically modify, that's the option that the state law provides. Whether we want to require them to adopt the zoning, of course we do, and whether you're required to share the city indebtedness, which we always want them to do as well. So those are the 3 criteria that we always look at when we have a request. So looking at it from that aspect, and I'll go into it a little more in detail with how to look at this annexation. At first look, it seems like it's not a great issue to consider this annexation, but once you kind of dive in to see into the details, there are some things that we may want to consider while making this decision. So I'll go through it. I'll just kind of hit 2 and 3 first, whether we want to have simultaneous adoption of the zoning. And I'll just cover that real quick. In the land use map, this property is designated as industrial. And so when they come into the city, they'll have a choice of either being in an industrial zone, a planned business park zone, or a planned industrial park zone. And because of our land use to zoning category transitions, they can pick any one of those. But the properties to the south, and I'm going to jump back and forth, the properties to the south is zoned industrial, so I would think that they would naturally, or we would naturally want them to have the industrial zoning when they come into the city. It's one of the most flexible zones in the industrial category, so that's probably what we would want them to choose, but we'll give them the choice for that. And then, of course, the city indebtedness, we want them to be part of that. So the more challenging part of this discussion is the utilities for this property, and I'll go through that in a little bit. So here, again, just to get your bearings, these are the 3 properties that have requested annexation. This is Oak Harbor Road, Goldie Road, and the sewer for this property is the most challenging to think through. So the closest sewer connection, gravity sewer, is at Crosby. So it's a pretty good distance away from these properties. The other sewer system is along Goldie. And all the properties in between Oak Harbor and Goldie kind of slope towards the middle. And and I have a slide, there are some low areas here that kind of drain into the wetlands. So this, from a terrain standpoint, it's pretty challenging to provide sewer. Now, so what are the choices here? So if they annex into the city, let's say the city accepts the annexation and they annex into the city, they probably won't be able to develop anything on their property until they can connect to the sewer. The sewer is really far away, so if they annex into the city, they'll have to wait for a chance to connect to the sewer. Now, there are several ways that they can jump ahead. They can say, well, we'll build the sewer system and then do the latecomers agreement for all the other properties that can connect to it. So they can do that. The infrastructure that's necessary to do that is pretty pricey, so I can't see that as being an option that they would consider to invest in that much of infrastructure to develop their property. They need something really substantial in order to make that investment. So that's one of the most least likely scenarios that will happen. The other thing that can happen is currently there's a building there that was used as a soccer training facility, I think. This building was built in the county, and I think they have a septic system that supports that particular use. So what they can potentially do when they're in the city is say, we want to build something that's low intensity, that doesn't have any need for bathrooms or anything, which the only use that comes to mind is like a storage facility, where most of it is just sheds and you don't have anybody living on it, and they can potentially kind of maybe tie into the existing septic system and have that use. So those are the two, that's a highly likely scenario given all the uses that can be on there. Is it the best use for that property? No, that's a different question to answer. Now, if the city says, well, since we don't have a septic system, we don't think it's a good idea to bring you into the city right now, then we're basically rejecting the annexation request. And the applicant has couple of other options now. Now they can go to the county and say, the city has not annexed me in, so I'd like to pursue a development in the county. And they have that ability to do so through the interlocal agreement. And so they can pursue a development in the county, and they can have septic systems. And then what that does for the city is it puts us in a disadvantage because they are in the UGA, and the chances that they will get back into the city is many years away, because a septic system failure has to occur in order for them to want to connect into the sewer system in the city. So it's the property location is in such a way that any development from a city standpoint would require a city sewer connection. Unfortunately, a system is not in place currently to be able to help to serve them. If we say no, then they can continue in the county, and then it'll be really a long time before the city can annex. So it's kind of a tough scenario in terms of what we want to choose in order to consider this request. Now, there's been a lot of requests in this area for annexation, and so you know, is it wise for the city to think about investing in a sewer system here for the overall development of the area? So our sewer comprehensive plan actually does have some sub-area plans in terms of a sewer system in this area. And the handout that is going around is basically a copy of the pages from our 2008 sewer comprehensive plan that outlines a proposal on what kind of system would be helpful for this area. And if you look at the last sheet on the map here, it kind of shows basically what it is you'll need to have a pump station at the low point, right? So here is an exhibit that kind of shows the 7th Avenue wetlands. You can see there are some wetlands. Here's the properties that are requesting annexation, and we can't see, but there's a low point there, and there are some wetlands that are denoted there as well from our maps. So this is kind of the low area, and what you really want is a pump station where all of the properties in between Oak Harbor and Goldie Road will kind of gravity sewer to that pump, and then you somehow get it up to Goldie Road, and then you get it down through a gravity sewer back to our wastewater clean water facility. The attachment of the copies that I passed around to you in 2008 has a price tag of about $4.5 million for this project. So I'm sure those estimates could be different if you consider a system like that today. So building the sewer system is not part of the action that you're likely to take with this annexation. I mean, that's totally different. But that's something that you can consider whether you want to add in this year's capital improvements plan going forward. And if you add anything, whether you have the money and whether that actually gets approved as part of the CIP can't be predicted at this time. But that is an option that you have as a city council to consider adding some kind of a project in so that you can eventually have service here, and then encourage annexation of this property and go through with the annexation, let them be aware of the situation in this area. You probably want to enter into an annexation agreement with them, because the other thing that I didn't mention is the street network system here. So all the lines that you see here came from our transportation plan. So this is primarily what's in our transportation plan, and you can see these dotted lines over here in the northern part of the town. And these are future connections. Some of these roads do not exist right now, and this is what we'd like to see in terms of network and connectivity. Now, when you overlay those lines onto an aerial photograph, this is This is the extension of 16th. This is what they're calling Rifle Road that connects to Gun Club Road. I think we have some easements there right now. Eventually, when the property is developed, we'll get some street network there. And then this green line here, which is to the east, is Northeast 24th. Here we don't have quite the any public easements or right of way, but this is the properties requesting annexation. So any development there, you'd want to have at least half-street developments to the south there, with the eventual idea that they should connect here. So you want to have an annexation agreement with them that outlines all the parameters that, you know, upon development they'll have to do some kind of street development in order to do these connections. So this is a request. There's some choices here that the city council will have to make and also plan for as you move forward. So it's not a very straightforward annex, got services, you can develop kind of a scenario. There are some timing issues here, and development could be delayed based on when utilities are available. So, but if you say no, then the chances of annexation get a little remote just because of the time involved in it. So these are some of the things that surround this annexation request. We're going to bring it to you on March 5th to meet that 60-day requirement and to be able to talk to the applicant about this. But I thought we'll bring it here first and let you know of all these options that you have available, so that we can kind of talk about questions and comments before we come for formal action.
Just last point on that, when we've already submitted the agenda bill, of course. Right now, staff is recommending that the council authorize the annexation to proceed, to give us and you and the applicant a chance to explore what options might be available for the ultimate annexation. As a reminder, if you do that step next Tuesday, you're under no, you're not obligated when it comes back to you to actually approve it. If you think it's still not timely, you don't have to approve it at the second meeting just because you've recommended it or you've allowed it to go forward at the first meeting. But our recommendation at this point is for you to give it the green light at this stage so that we can continue to see what our possibilities are.
Councilor Watson.
So for the individual landowner, I may have missed this when I stepped out to get water, but after we do that initial, then that will allow you to have the conversation with them and to figure out, you know, I mean, I would like to have their interest, you know, too, and make sure that we're not forcing them to, you know, just sort of, you can still have the conversation and
yes, I
think, they can still choose to proceed or not to proceed at that point too?
Well,
or how
yes, absolutely, because what you would do is you would authorize them to circulate the petition. And since they are, assuming that you don't recommend some change in the geographic boundaries, and that you stick with the properties which came forward to you, you'd authorize them to circulate the petition. That's the next step. Since they control all of the properties, that's really not a challenging step for them, but it would give CAC and others the opportunity to chat with them to see, well, really what are your plans and your goals at this point, and how might they be able to take into account the challenge, the challenge of the sewer and the things that we're talking about.
And then on that note, since you guys kind of mentioned it, I fully support. I know that it sounds like a large amount of money, but to me, I would fully support the upgrades and infrastructure to this part of our city. I think it would be a great economic stimulant to that area. And Beth and I were whispering that big green space on the left there, we're hoping to make a regional park, and to have it in that proximity to this area. Yeah, I think there are lots of economic possibilities in that area if all of that were to happen in our future. And I know it's not going to happen tomorrow or maybe even next year, but in the next 10 years, I could see that whole area maybe being a big economic driver for our city. So I support the investment, if you will, in upgrading the infrastructure in that area.
It would be a continuation of our long-term goals in this area. The city's very first rural economic development grant that we submitted to the county was in fact for the old sewer gosh, 12 or more years ago. And that's when we did the gravity main, the force main, and the lift station at the end of Goldie by Altfield Road. And we fully anticipated that was just the first phase of the sewer, and we always expected to come back and tackle this piece in the middle. As circumstances played out, our next stop actually was to do the one in the old Technical Drive, because as we all know, there was a real reason to pursue that one for that particular grant process. But we've talked with a number of property owners along either Goldie or Oak Harbor Road that are interested in that sewer. In fact, there was an annexation request south of here on Oak Harbor Road that we could not support a couple of years ago because of the sewer issue. And I speak with that applicant on a fairly regular basis, and they are still interested and want to know when we might be able to tackle the sewer. And maybe just the last thought in that area is that it is a project of significant enough size and complexity that really, if it's going to be done, it's going to need to be done by the city. It's not something that we really expect the private sector to be able to tackle because of the number of properties involved and the need for easements, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Mr. Olbert has it.
Yeah, for more orientation, you did mention, turn it off.
It's at the end of the slide, Captain Hall.
So at the end?
There.
All right, I'll try to push the right buttons here. Yeah, there's the park property we're trying to buy. We purchased this property here, and these two, I had it here, is that right there?
Yep.
So we've kind of been moving, in my short time here, we've had a lot of interest in that area to north and properties in this area of the city.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. So realistically, the city's supposed to be providing the safety, the sewer, and the water, and make sure the electricity, and hopefully we will have fiber. But if we want people to invest and bring their business here, we have to have the infrastructure. So I don't see how the city can pass and not maybe trying to speed up a little bit in getting the sewer there. This is, since I've been on it since '08, our dream to have our light industry and industrial park in here to bring money into the city. And if we're just sitting back and wait until someone wants to buy the property or bring in a business and we don't have sewer, water, electricity stuff for them, then why would they want to invest in our city? And I think we've been behind the 8 ball and not having the infrastructure there so they can come in and say, okay, you've got it. This is what I want to build, and help me get my building done because we have the infrastructure. So I think that's got to be a high priority in adding that to our capital plans as far as the sewer, water lines, and broadband or whatever we're going to have, because industry is going to need that. But why would they want to come if we don't have it? And I think we need to develop, we have zoning for stuff, we just don't have the infrastructure so that the zoning will work. We kind of wait till someone comes and then we're way behind in trying to get the project done. So I would say for sure we need to work on that sooner than later. But
And I think we have been positioning ourselves with the acquisition of some of the property that we had in that area, with the TSI expansion that's going on there. But certainly, you're right, a lot more needs to be done.
I mean, that's what, 100 jobs?
Yeah.
Just right there, that one industry.
Councilor Sebelius.
Do we know, is the applicant stated any kind of intent, not that it affects the decisions, to why they want to annex or what their intent is?
We don't have that in the standard letter that they sent to the office initiating it. So we don't know whether they have any immediate plans or more of a long-term plan.
With regards to the Harbor Heights, 70 acres, sewer would not come across from, surely we have sewer closer than running up Oak Harbor, don't we?
We have sewer at the south end of that property, stubbed out of, I can't think of the name of that subdivision.
Red Wing.
Well, Red Wing is to the west, but there's another subdivision, Pacific Crest, that's on the south side that we stub sewer to that property.
I think there's a
Right
street.
there.
Okay. And so depending on how that property gets developed, I mean, I'm not opposed to looking at developing or us bearing the cost of that infrastructure. I'd certainly want to have some numbers before, well, let me say it this way. I think personally, I think we're in need of a couple hundred houses and whatever we have to invest to get that done, more than we need light industrial and what that's going to mean as far as tax revenue to the city. But as far as a much bigger long-term comprehensive plan, I know is it the Mangot property?
Yes.
That might be a solution for them. So, you know, I'm going to look at it from a number standpoint, and if we need to spend $1 million in infrastructure, what does that really mean to us? Versus, I'm throwing out a number, I don't know what it is. Versus what else could we do with that money and have a more immediate solution to our more pressing needs, which I think would be housing over light industrial. That's all I'm getting.
As Pat said, I think the CIP process that we'll be engaging, you know, like we do for the comp plan every year, is a perfect opportunity to be talking about the mechanics of this. You know, what might be the appropriate timing, what might be that, you know, that ballpark cost estimate, what might be the funding sources, what is our capacity to tackle that project in the short term versus the midterm. All of those things can be discussed during the CIP.
Councilor Larson?
Thank you, Mayor. I think these are all very relevant and important discussions to have. I think the immediate concern at hand, though, I would recommend and support moving forward with the annexation process, just because we have questions that we'd like to hear the answer to from the applicant. And then I think at the same time, in fairness to them, they need to understand, I think that what you, the way you laid it out for us, CAC, was very clear and concise, and the property owners should get that information so that they're moving forward with an understanding of realistically and feasibly where we're going to be in the future with our ability to provide services to that property. Thank you.
Councilor Holmberg?
Thank you, Mayor. Now, Steve, help me out here with this timeline of, we got 60 days, we approve this for them to go forward. We have to respond, they have to respond within 60 days.
No, sir. The only timeline that state law outlines is the initial 60 days by which we have to get that annexation request in front of you.
Right.
And
Then what is the timeline for the applicant to respond?
there is no statutory limit.
And there isn't an expiration date to that?
There
Okay.
is not. What our experience tells us that when we're dealing with a single property owner and they have 100% of the valuation, that can go very quickly if they want it to, or it can go a little more slowly if that's what they want.
Okay,
When you add properties to it, and now we've got people who may not necessarily be wild about annexation, that's when that process gets a little.
Let's assume that they have the controlling interest in the annexation, and they want to go ahead with the annexation, but they don't have sewer. Does that put us into the applicant's timeline to perform, to put the lift stations in there? How do we balance our sources of funds to perform, to put in, to provide sewer to that area or to that property? It's been my experience that the developer is always responsible for providing the utilities to their property.
They are. And so that's the classic answer to your question, is that we have the long-term plan that shows us generally where we're going to have sewer. If the applicant wants to have that sewer available to them before we're in a position to do it, then it's their obligation to put that in. And as CAC mentioned, maybe they do that, maybe they pursue a latecomers agreement. That depends on the wherewithal of the property owner.
Or an LID?
That's possible as well.
A regional LID?
Sure, certainly. If, however, they are more comfortable with, we can wait on the city approach, then they just wait until such time as it rises to the top on our capital improvement list, and then we tackle that project. So those are your two basic scenarios.
But it for sure doesn't put us into a timeline corner.
No, sir.
Thank you. That's the only question I have. Thanks, Mayor.
Anyone else? Okay. Thank you, CAC.
Thanks, Cal.
We'll move on to the final section of Development Services, D, Wetland Code. Is that Talisaya? Comments?
Talisaya.
Talisaya? Okay. Welcome back. Did you Mr. Lafitte?
Well, as we all recall, when we had the critical areas ordinance coming before you for approval last August, we had Mr. Bill Shields from Talisaya speak and issue some comments in regards to creating some additional flexibilities in our critical areas ordinance, and specifically relating to our wetland buffer requirements that we had. We received written comments that were very specific in what essentially he was issuing at the August public hearing in late November. Staff has taken some time to review those comments and see how those flexibilities that he was recommending actually could fit into our code, or if they were even a logical request for us to do. So what we would like to present today is kind of a summary of those comments and how we would like to address those. And the document that I'm passing around is just kind of a matrix that summarizes the comments. I think I also have copies of the memo that was emailed around. I don't know if you have it with you now, but I have, it's in the packet, okay. So the numbers in the left column correspond to the comments that he was making. Obviously the last comment, he had multiple sub-items, so follow along with that. The next column identifies kind of a major category of what his comments are referring to. The current code is, of course, how we adopted our code back in August, and whether we incorporate or not, or how we deal with the comments that he was recommending. The next column is a recommendation of Talisaya itself. It's kind of a summary of what he was looking at doing as far as creating potentially some additional flexibilities. And the last column then is just a quick synopsis of whether there's an advantage or a strong disadvantage to incorporating those recommendations into our code. Steve, I don't know if you want to, how we want to proceed with this.
There's a couple ways we could go. One is we could sort of go blow by blow, but that potentially might be fairly time consuming. Perhaps an easier way to say it is, of the 9 suggestions that were made, staff thinks that the council could reasonably consider 8 of those. There's one that we would not recommend to you, and that is number 3. And it's frankly because it's very difficult to imagine the scenario that was described in the letter, where a property owner was voluntarily seeking to improve the quality of either the wetland or the buffer by removing small areas of soil, and they would be doing that outside of something that would already require a permit. The recommendation was that there should be some ability to remove small amounts of soil from a wetland or a wetland buffer without, if it was below a certain threshold, without getting a permit. Our experience tells us that if people are going to be removing small amounts of soil in a wetland or a wetland buffer, they just do it. They don't come to the city for a permit. If it's associated with a development project of some sort, it's already going to be encompassed by a permit. And so we were struggling to see the logic of allowing this digging activity to occur as was recommended. Coupled with that is that there is not a minimum threshold either in the IDC or in the IRC that tells us that below a certain number of yards, you don't need a grading permit. So there wasn't already a threshold established. We were hesitant to establish an arbitrary threshold in that area. So that's the only one of these recommendations that we think gave us some pause. The rest of them we think are worth exploring and incorporating into a revised critical areas code as it deals with wetlands, and we feel comfortable in making that suggestion to you.
Okay. Thank you, Steve.
And ordinarily, and just maybe as one more comment if I may, Mayor, we apologize for providing you this table at the meeting today. We were working on its final form up until late yesterday afternoon, and so we just did not have an opportunity to get it into your hands before today.
So I guess I'd like to say that I appreciate staff's work on this, and then especially, you know, it goes along with finding other options, other ways to do business, and other possibilities. So thank you for your work, and thank you to the suggested company that suggested this. And I don't know if council wants to take any particular, do you have questions on any particular thing here tonight? Otherwise, it's potentially going to come back to council for approval. Is that?
Yes, sir. We do think that since what we'd be doing would be revising the code, that we will need to go back to Planning Commission because that's the appropriate process. So we do a Planning Commission hearing, we would do SEPA, we do our notification to the Department of Commerce that we're revising our development regulations as required by the Growth Management Act. But that's we can make that process as compact as possible because these are really fine-tuning the existing language. We're not talking about major departures from what's already in the code and what we've just recently gone through an extensive process on. So we view this as tweaking rather than substantial rewriting.
Yes, Councilor Larson.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, thanks for using that language right there, Steve, because starting on page 27 of our packet, I highlighted a number of things where I have concerns that the overall effect of this rewrite or these additions might make it easier to erode the safeties that we have in place. And so the first one is the bottom of the page when it talks about paper fill. And it references another code, and it says it would allow under certain circumstances reduction of a wetland buffer to less than the prescriptive allowable reduction. So that was the first one. Then you go to the next page and you look at letter B, Innovative Development Design, the IDD, as provided in Snohomish County. And it says that allows, in accordance with specific conditions as determined by the planning director, reduction of the standard wetland buffer widths to less than that prescribed in the code. There's a lot of language in here where it seems like the goal is to reduce these buffers, and we spent a lot of time and effort coming up with this code to make sure that we were in compliance and that we were maintaining those critical areas. And then in letter D, under the regional benefit, under Mill Creek Code, it says, then it looks as though this is taking some authority and giving it to the director. It says the director shall have the authority to, again, reduce the width of the standard buffer on a case-by-case basis. So maybe this would...
I can take those 3 points if you
Okay,
like.
great. That would be awesome.
So the paper fill one is actually a really interesting concept, and we have the slide on the screen, and it was included in the letter that council received. And I think the simplest way to say this is that if a property owner, make sure I got the right button here, if a property owner on the development site, where on the property next to him there's a wetland, and we see this situation somewhat regularly. So there, you know, Joe is trying to develop on his property, but on Sam's property is the wetland, and the wetland buffer, you know, creeps over into Joe's property. So how does he deal with that? How does Joe deal with that? Well, you can just draw that line and stay out of there and put your development plan, or this paper fill concept, I won't do it justice probably, but allows for this reduction in the buffer here, so that it doesn't move on into Joe's property, if the wetland is increased in size here and the buffer is increased in size on Sam's property. So what that implies, of course, is that there's an agreement between the two property owners, or perhaps it's the same property owner. He owns both parcels. And so this is a chance to employ some flexibility, but not reduce the functions and values of the wetland. And that's a phrase that you hear us use a lot, because that's our mandate, is we're supposed to be protecting the function and value of the wetland so that it retains all of its environmental characteristics. And we would not propose something to you that would erode that, to use your word very much. So this is a pretty interesting concept. It probably will not be applied on a regular basis, but it would be one tool in the tool chest should this particular scenario present itself. The innovative development design concept, I think there's already parallels to this we see in our code elsewhere, but it's not in the critical areas code. It's, of all places, in the building code. So in the building code, as you all know, we have standards for noise level reduction because of the flights at the Navy base, right? And so we have prescriptive standards in there. Build your wall like this, install these kinds of windows, use these kinds of vents, and you meet the standard. But there's a piece in there that allows the builder to propose something else that will meet those same standards, but it's done in a different way, and that's subject to the approval of the building official. So we see this approach being fairly parallel to that if the applicant and their wetland biologist can propose a different way to meet the same ecological values that we would otherwise get out of the standard application of our code, this language would give us the opportunity to consider that. But again, they would have to demonstrate to us that they're getting the same things out of what they're proposing as our regular code would. So we feel pretty comfortable about that one. And then the regional benefit one, again, is one we probably don't think we see a ton of applicability, given our knowledge of where wetlands are in our UGA and where we think we might be going at some point in the future. But it's giving that chance that says, little thing, big thing, we can make the big thing way better by maybe doing something different over here. Again, it's that flexibility, and if we look at things on a system-wide perspective, we might be achieving more good on the regional side than we would by focusing on the little piece. So real quick, sort of layman's language, I think that's how we would address those three topics.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have for now.
Mayor Fulton? Okay, thank you.
I just want to say thank you to staff too for stepping back and taking a look at some options. I think it hits you pretty hard in the face that, no, we can't do this, but I appreciate it very, very much for your effort, and I'm really pleased and excited that I know with Carl Friend's property in the street, there's some difficulty in there, and I think some of these ideas may help with the flexibility when he does develop some of that, and it helps you guys out too, so you're not the bad guys. I mean, this is working towards solutions, so I really, really appreciate that, and thank you. I know it took a lot of time to get it done and whatever, so thank you very much. Appreciate that. And would like to also thank the Talisea. Send them a thank you note and say thank you for submitting it as a suggestion. So appreciate it.
No one else? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to item number A under Legal Department section, proposed ordinance amending Chapter 1.24, Oak Harbor Municipal Code Appeals. We have our City Attorney, Nikki Esparza, joining us. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council. So my items this afternoon are going to be far less interesting than the preceding topics. These fall under topics that only Nikki is interested in. So my first item today is an update to our appeals code. There are multiple code locations that reference an appeal process. A lot of chapters have their own appeal process built in, but those that don't are covered under Chapter 1.24 of the Municipal Code. And as I was going through and looking at changing Title V, and then I looked at Title VI in the last couple of years, I saw that maybe 1.24 could be a little cleaner and a little easier to understand. So in an effort to make it easier to understand, Anna and I took a look at this code. So the appeals chapter is important because it allows citizens who feel that he or she has received an unfair or wrong decision with regard to permits, licenses, or other appealable decisions under the municipal code. It gives them the ability to appeal such a decision before commencing any sort of action, if there is an actionable cause. So this also allows the city to provide better customer service to its citizens. I think it's important to hear what our citizens have to say and how we could do things better, and this is an opportunity to do that. So we've made some changes to the code, and the chapter itself provides a hierarchy of appellant bodies within the city. A decision made by an employee is appealed to the department head of that department. A decision made by the department head is appealed to the city administrator, and a decision made by the city administrator or the mayor is appealed either to a hearing examiner or to the city council. So the amendments to this code, we've reordered sections in order to make them flow better in terms of process and applicability. We've added a definitions section to help clarify the terminology that we're using through the chapter. And we've amended the form of appeal section so that it is easier for the applicant to understand and to file an appeal. And it also provides for efficiencies for the staff that's processing it. We've added a filing fee to help cover administrative costs. We're proposing $100 for appeals at the department head, city administrator, or city council level, and $225 to the hearing examiner, because we do have to pay for our hearings examiners. So the city clerk is the one that would accept the appeals. It's similar to claims. The city clerk accepts claims that come in and then funnels them down to my office. Since we consider it kind of similar, we thought that city clerk would be the appropriate location for that. We've simplified the scheduling and noticing section so that it is more understandable both for the applicants and for staff. If council is interested in proceeding with the filing fees, we will bring those forward after the amendments to the code as a part of a resolution amending the master fee schedule. So additionally, we've created a standard of review section that provides guidance to the applicant with respect to what they have to show. We've created two sections for the hearing, both for the process and the conduct, process versus substance at the hearing, rather than jumbling the two topics together. We've simplified the method and form of decision for clarity, added a procedural integrity section which protects the final decision of the appeal from being called into question based on procedural irregularities, and amended the enforcement and violation section to reflect current code practices for consistency and effectiveness. So while it may seem like not an important amendment, we have been going through our code, and anytime we see an issue that needs cleaning up, we try and go ahead and bring that forward, and this is one that I would like to clean up just for my own comfort levels. And so if you have any questions, I will take them. You do have a copy of the proposed amendments, Ordinance 1852, in your packet.
Councilor Servatius.
Thank you, Mayor. Could you give us some examples of where you see this, where it's currently utilized or where you see it being utilized? And I'll preface that with what I guess is on the forefront of my mind a lot is development. There's been...
Those are excluded.
That was the next question.
Yeah, so under the, they're under 1.24, what'll become section 020, this chapter shall not apply to Title 11, 12, 13, 14. Those are all the development sections.
Okay.
So really, we're talking about licenses and permits and things like that.
Okay. And then my last point would be on the fees. I would fully support that. I think a lot of times obviously we're here to serve the public, but at the same time, we need to have some kind of cost recovery mechanism that at least is borderline neutral. And I don't know if $100 by the time you prepare all the paperwork and staff time, it's probably not recovering that cost. So
Probably not.
but also not so high that it would dissuade someone from appealing something. But I'd be okay if they were even a little higher, probably.
Okay.
Blaine, did you?
Yeah, this does give an opportunity before people go to litigation, and that's the whole reason why we want this appeal process, so that they can do the remedies in-house before they go to litigation. And so I think that's why we had it, and we're streamlining it to make it a little easier there.
Councilor Larson.
I know you said started this out by prefacing with it. This isn't a very exciting process here, but I think it's valuable. I agree with Councilman Zarias that the fee seems nominal, but what's more important than that is the process that allows our citizens to feel that they can be heard if they disagree with the decision, and this gives them and the city staff a real clear and concise way to address those concerns. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no other questions, we will move on to second last item for legal, proposed, that's B, proposed ordinance amending Chapter 3.56, Oak Cover Municipal Code gambling tax.
So first of all, I would like to request that you ignore the draft that is contained in your packet. That was not a draft that was ready for circulation. So I am handing out the draft that is the current draft. Let me start out by saying that we tax gambling activities in order to provide funding for public safety. That is what gambling taxes are required to be used for. In our constant review of code, we did note that our gambling code does not take full advantage of what we're allowed to do under state law, and it also needed some clarification with regard to some exemptions. So we took the liberty of drafting some code that, if the council is interested in, will come forward that makes some changes. So RCW 9.46.110 allows local cities and counties to tax gambling receipts, and those maximum limitations are set forth in 946. The amendments to the code that we're proposing adopt charitable exemptions based on 9.46.110 and imposes taxes for all gambling activities that were not previously taxed. There were some that were missing in our code. It also collects the maximum amount of taxes on all gambling activities that are permitted under state law and adds new definitions for the additional gambling activities. So charitable exemptions, we currently exempt from tax charitable organizations whose gross receipts less the amount awarded as cash or merchandise prizes from operating bingo and amusement games is less than $5,000. The change in our code will reflect that the exemption is for the first $5,000 for bingo games, and then there's a 5% tax on the gross receipts less the amount awarded as cash or merchandise after that $5,000 mark. We're also changing the code to reflect an exemption on the first $10,000 for raffle activities, and then a 5% tax on gross receipts after that $10,000 mark. There's going to be a new section that exempts from tax the first $5,000 for amusement games for charities, and then a 2% tax imposed on income after the $5,000. Also an imposition of 10% tax on gross receipts for punch board or pull tab activities. There's also a new section that imposes a 20% tax on gross receipts less the amount awarded as cash or merchandise from social card room activities. So currently under our code, we tax bingo and sales of punch boards and pull tabs. The state law allows us to tax raffles, amusement games, and social card games as well. So we are missing that revenue source. Section 3.56050, we propose adding raffles, amusement games, social card games in order to impose the tax. Increasing the tax rates on the gambling activities. Currently, bingo games are taxed at 5%, so there won't be a change there. Sales of punch boards and pull tabs are taxed at 1%. The amendment would tax 10% on punch boards and pull tabs, 10% of gross less the amount. That's a typo. So raffles will be at 5%, amusement games will be at 2%, and social card games will be at 20%, which is what the state law allows. So we'll also be adding definitions to the Muni Code. Raffles means a competition in which people obtained numbered tickets. Each ticket having the chance of winning a prize. At a set time, the winners are drawn from the container, holding a copy of every number, and meets the requirements of the RCW. Social card games is also the same definition as in the RCW. Added an appeals section or amending the appeals section. Propose amending the appeals section in order to process appeals in accordance with Oak Harbor Municipal Code 1.24, which is the code we were just talking about, for uniformity and consistency with other Oak Harbor Municipal Code appeal processes. So you certainly want to know the effects on Oak Harbor businesses. There are currently 7 local businesses that report gambling taxes for bingo and pull tabs. Taxes are collected quarterly, and in 2018 we collected approximately $9,100 in gambling taxes combined. Most of the revenue was generated by pull tab activities. In terms of providing notice for any changes to this code, the Washington State Gambling Commission requires licenses. The Gambling Commission is the regulatory authority for gambling. We're the taxing authority. And so we would, of course, be checking the business license status with the commission and pulling those addresses. We'd provide a pamphlet in the utility statements, and then we would also send a letter to all business license holders of the new gambling tax ordinance. With that, I will take any questions that you might have.
Mayor Pro Tem.
When would this go into effect? You said you would send education in different means. I mean, is it a gradual thing, or they'll have 90 days from once this is formally approved before it's enacted, or do you have to wait till next year? What is?
So it would be immediately in place. Our ordinances take effect 5 days after passing. And these taxes are collected quarterly, so.
April then.
Is that the next?
I don't think that's the first one. In the first one.
Councilor
Thank you.
Just curious, you had the $5,000 threshold in there for a lot of different activities. Why is the raffle at $10,000, just out of curiosity?
You mean
Probably
the percentages?
Second or third slide, no, you had a threshold of, I forget, it's probably the third, maybe fourth slide, you talked about.
Oh, going back. That's directly out of state law.
So the first, for raffles, the first 10K is exempt?
For charitable organizations, not for the general businesses.
Okay.
That's only for the
that
bona fide charities.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Just wondering.
Councilor Larson.
Anyway, I had 2 questions. Tell me again, you said there's a pretty strict rule on what we're able to spend this revenue on?
Yes, state law requires that we spend this revenue on public safety.
Okay. And I just had 2 other things that stood out to me. So the punch boards and pull tabs, we're recommending a 10-fold increase in that tax.
That's what we're allowed to collect under state law.
Well, I understand we're allowed to collect it. Just, I mean, looking at where we are and what we're charging now, that's, you know, a 10-fold increase. And then the social card games, we weren't taxing at all. And I know we're allowed to collect, but 20% seems, I don't even know if we have any of these going on in town, but it seems rather exorbitant, especially right off the bat. I could see maybe coming up to close to what the state allows, but on a couple of taxes like this, just hitting people that hard right off the bat who are paying a small amount of tax and giving them a tenfold increase, or who weren't being taxed for an activity and saying now we're going to hit them with a 20% tax. It seems shocking.
We started at the full amount. I mean, from a policy decision, it's totally up to the council. So,
okay.
From staff's point of view, let's just look at all. Well, they're amending the ordinance and doing the language. Let's just put the maximums in here, and if you want to notch it back, that's your policy decision. Or we could try to be a little bit more innovative and do it in a step system if you want to. So,
thank you,
Councilor Umber.
Thank you, Mayor. Mrs. Sparza, could you go to that slide that showed what you collected? What do we collect annually?
Collected approximately $9,100 from 7 different businesses. That.
So that's my question is that all we are collecting, $9,100 on the existing gambling tax?
Yes.
Then the next question is, by the proposed ordinance change, using the same volume, how much money will we be collecting? Does that go from 20 to 20,000, 40,000? Is it really relevant for the effort that will go into all of this?
I can't answer that question because there were types of gambling that we weren't taxing before. So I don't know if that would create a situation where more businesses are funneling gambling tax into the city, because there were types of gambling we weren't taxing before.
You know, when I look at $9,100, I'm looking at, are we spending $9,100 just to get to a paper correction here? Is it really relevant?
And that's completely a policy call. These are just things staff notices and brings forward, and if you want to move on them, then you can, and if you don't, that's okay too. I would say that just doing basic math, if the majority of the 9,100 was from pull tabs, and we were only collecting 1/10 of the amount that we were allowed to collect on pull tabs, then it's not a small amount of money.
So the purpose of this is revenue generating for police, essentially, public safety. Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Servadius.
So one of the thoughts, so back in the Bayside Lounge, which became Element Days, we were not taxing those card games? Wow. It's an intriguing business model. There's a lot of money in that.
So I have a question about the charitable nonprofit organization. Do we have a good idea about the impact that's going to have?
I don't. The exemption levels are fairly high, $5,000 and $10,000.
And that is a nonprofit that is providing that they're doing bingo or some
raffles, bingos, pull tabs.
Raffles, okay.
So am I seeing that there may not be interest in amending this code right now, or am I seeing that there is interest in amending this code?
I'm interested.
I'm interested to a much lesser degree. I'm not interested in, so let me clarify that. I'm not saying I'm interested in the amendment to a much lesser degree. I'm interested in the amendment.
Barely interested.
As soon as I said that, but I'd like to see us basically do some kind of step increase and marginally increase these step by step to incrementally bring them up to maybe the state maximums or close to it over a period of time.
So if you'd like to shoot me an email as to what it is you're envisioning, that would be fantastic.
Great. I'll do that.
Councilor Ellenberg.
And I like the step idea too, because if we're not taxing some areas that are relevant and that make a big difference, I'd like to know what the relevance is. And I kind of like to tippy-toe into this one.
Sure. Well, apparently there's big money in card games.
Well, Paula,
How much have you lost lately?
I'll jump in here because I handle money for a living. I don't gamble. I say it's a tax on idiots. I know I'm going to get some serious back. Jesse, don't print that. But truly, I think sometimes I feel that the people who are participating in these activities might be the least that should be participating in these activities. I sometimes worry about that. And so I don't think that taxing some of these now, my church does a fairly productive bingo, the Knights of Columbus, right? But that all goes back to charity. So, but at the same time, I think that I have watched people probably spending money. I mean, there's gambling hotlines for a reason. So I don't know if taxing some of these would dissuade folks or the businesses from participating. But I do know, and I did mention the card game, that I know that that is a serious cash business that probably should be taxed. There's tremendous amounts of money that flows through those businesses. So if it provides us with more money for public safety, I'm going to support it. And if it might dissuade some people from participating in those activities, and I'm not a prudent, or I'm not, how do I say that? I just don't gamble because I know the odds are not in your favor. But I worry that sometimes I don't want to endorse something that will let someone go down that path any easier than necessary. Enough said.
So I have a question about his scenario, about his church. Even though the money that's made all goes back to charity, would it still be taxed if it's over this limit? So there would still be a tax on what?
Over the $5,000 and the $10,000 thresholds.
Okay.
But we're not changing the bingo law. That was one that was staying at the 5%.
There's a change to the exemption
To the
levels.
exemption level goes in. Okay.
Anyone else? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
We will now move on to Marina. Marina rates increase ordinance XXX. Looks like we have our harbor master with us, Chris Slepper, and also at the table is our Marina Advisory Chair, Ken Hewlett. Thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon, Mayor, council members. Today I'm here to talk about a proposed marina rate increase. This is something that we hope to see on the March 19th City Council meeting agenda. So as many of you are aware, the marina is an enterprise fund, which means that we are self-supported. We rely on revenue that we earn at the marina. It's typically generated from moorage, sheds, fuel, storage. Those are really the big workhorses at the marina. We don't receive any tax money. We are a public marina. There's a ton of things to do down at the marina besides mess around with boats. We have lots of events. We have clubs. We have the Yacht Club, Deception Pass, Power and Sail, Squadron. We have the Dragon Boat Club. We have a lot of people come down and just walk around and look at nature. There's a lot of birds, a lot of fish, seals, otters, those sorts of things. And then a ton of people come down to take pictures. I can always tell when the quarter's ending at the school because we have a lot of students coming down with cameras taking pictures. There's a lot going on at the marina. There's always things going on behind the scenes. We have some fairly large projects that we're working on and some smaller ones. We're always rebuilding and refurbishing power pedestals. One of the things we're looking at doing in the near future is to replace the fuel supply lines underneath the hoist pier that go from the shore all the way down to the fuel pumps. There's some pile hoops on FDOC that we're going to replace. We're going to spread that over 5 years, about $30,000 per year. One of the things that we've heard more consistently from our tenants is that they'd like some sort of security system down there besides the gates. So this year we'll be putting in security cameras. And I'm really happy to say that we are hiring a new person. We're deep into that process, and that person is actually starting the 12th of next month. So we're really excited about that. Some of the bigger projects that we're working on is renegotiating the DNR lease. As you are aware, our lease ends in June. And again, we're deep into that process as well. We expect to see the new lease within the next few weeks to a month, just the first draft of it. And we're also looking at launching options. How can we get boats in and out of the water with a truck and trailer type system? The picture there is Neil sitting there putting in a power pedestal. You can see the before and after. We take them out, we sandblast them, rewire them, paint them, all that stuff. They look brand new when we put them back in. We do have a Marine Advisory Committee, and that Marine Advisory Committee is led by Ken Hewitt here. We meet on the first Monday of each month. Typically in the summer we don't meet. They've discussed the rate increase 3 times, November, December, and January, and they reviewed and proposed all of the rates that we are proposing and many other ones. There was a lot of discussion on the different ways that we could raise the rates and the different things. In the end, they did support the rate increase and did make a formal recommendation to increase the rates. How we got to the new rates is we conducted a marina rate survey, and this is what we did in years past, where we surveyed marinas in our area, including Des Moines, which is the other city-owned marina. We took the average of similar or same services and then compared them to our current rates. The Marine Advisory Committee targeted 80% of the surveyed average is where our marina should be. Those should be our rates. One of the things you have to consider is what do these other marinas have around them? For example, Cap Sante with Safeway and Anthony's right there. La Conner, you can walk right into town. So their value may be a little bit more for similar services. It should also be noted that these rates we're proposing are based on the 2018 rates. We know that these other marinas are probably going through the similar process now and are going to raise their rates 3 to 5% in the next few months, just as we hope to do. And what we found is that most of our rates are currently at that 80% or a little bit higher threshold. And we also found, though, that in our 50 to 70 foot moorage category, it's way below that 80% rate. I believe the 50% was down around 74% and the 70 was around 71%. So there was a big gap to be made up there. So if you look at this slide, what the recommendation is the Marine Advisory Committee has made a recommendation that we increase rates by 3% this year and then each of the 3 subsequent years. In the 50 to 70 foot moorage category, they're recommending that we split that difference between 71 and 74% between 2 years. So they'll get the 3% raise this year, and then, for example, the 50 foot category would get an additional 2% or 3% as well. So that by the end of next year, we'll have them at that 80% threshold. As an example, some of the rates that we're looking at, if you look at the 32 foot category, they're currently paying $238.88. The proposed rate is $244.27, so that's a difference of $539. The 40 foot category, the difference is $7. But when you look at the 50 and 60 foot category, you can see that it's significantly more, and that's due to that catch up, to getting to that 80%. So for the next 2 years, they'll be a little bit higher. One of the things that we also put in as a recommendation was to charge a launch ramp fee. We've heard that we possibly should be charging that. So the recommendation was to charge $10 for a recreational boat to launch and retrieve, or $100 a year, or $15 for a commercial boat, or $150 a year. We would like to put that into a semi-trial mode because we're kind of concerned about what the costs are going to be with that function. And what I mean by that is, what is it going to cost? What's our return on investment as far as checking that box every day? How many people are going to use it? That sort of thing. It's extremely expensive to check cash boxes each day. So our hope is that we'll make this a fee this year and then come back to you in a year and say, this is what it's costing us to charge at the launch ramp. And we can show you the numbers of what that return on investment will be. Some of the other areas and examples are the environmental compliance fee is going to go from $729 to $751, and that's part of the moorage and the storage fees. That has to do with helping control the environment, purchasing pads, all those sorts of things. Guest electrical will go from $5 to $5.25, and that one's a little bit higher than the 3%, but it has to be a rounded number, so it's It's easier for people to work with. And then the sheds will go from $134.80 to $138.84. We estimate that this increase will generate an additional $30,000 in revenue, roughly. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Councilor Allenberg.
Thank you, Mayor. On the fees for the launch ramp, is there going to be a fee for overnight parking of leaving vehicles and trailers in the parking area?
Right. The launch ramp fee, I refer to it as the launch ramp fee, but it's a launch ramp and parking fee. So the way it's going to work is you'll pay your $10 to launch your fee for that day, and then it would roll over for the next day too if you were there for some.
So each day that the vehicle is parked there or you come back to launch, you're paying $10.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Just
And
like at the state parks. That's exactly how that works.
Okay. Then you mentioned about the cash box, and I understand the complexities of handling cash and accounting for it, etc. Is the cash box for a trial purpose to see how this goes? So I'm asking you that question, and then I have a follow-up.
Okay, sure. So what I envision is something similar to what we had at the RV park, or what the state parks have. You'll have a kiosk type thing with a box mounted on it, and people would walk up, fill out an envelope, they would put it into the box and put the receipt on their car. In my mind, this is a trial period. I think that before we spend thousands of dollars on a kiosk where you can swipe a card or enter cash or however you want to pay, that we find out what kind of business we're going to do. Are people going to use the ramp once we start charging a fee? Many things that we hear about the ramp is a gradual grade. And compared to the other ramps in the area, it's not the best ramp in the area to use. And we're wondering, are people using it because it's free, or are they using it because they like it? And after that first year, when we report back to you, that's something that we can tell you. And perhaps if it is successful, we would move on to a payment kiosk. We do intend on having some signage down there that says if you want to pay with a card, call this number, which would be the fuel dock attendant. You could go to the fuel dock, you could call the office and pay, that sort of deal.
Well, chasing a $10 fee for a Visa and have an attendant come down to run that is going to cost probably $30.
Well, they would go to the fuel dock is what I mean.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
But well, anyway, the only, because I've seen the pedestals that have little solar panels on it,
Sure.
where you use the card. I've used them a number of places,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know how much they cost. I don't know what the payback is, but for sure you have to enter your vehicle license number in those things and put your sticker on the window, much like the parking pedestals in downtown Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
You have to, the technology is there. I am very interested to see how it's going to be monitored if you just have people showing up, launching, and then leaving.
Right.
I'll come back and get you later. I'll launch the boat, we'll go out and crab, and then I'll come back, 4 o'clock or whatever, and pick you up when the tide is there. So it's going to be an interesting experience for you down there, I'm sure.
It's going to be very interesting. We're too excited to see how that's going to work out. One thing I didn't add earlier was that all marine attendants, whether you're moorage, shed, or storage, you'll be able to use the ramp. You're exempt from this charge.
Mr. Powers.
For frame of reference, Chris researched the parking pedestal model a few years ago, and if my memory serves me, that was somewhere in the range of $5,000 to $7,000.
Yep.
Just for the pedestal.
Sure.
Then you've got the installation cost and the software and all those things. So we're very cautious about wanting to jump right into that. We want to do the trial period to see whether we could support that kind of capital cost.
Councilor Survey.
Thank you. This might be a question for Ken. So on the fee structure, when you guys have your conversations with the Marine Advisory Committee, are we working ahead as far as some of the deferred maintenance, or it's an aging marina? I don't want to necessarily just adjust the rates to stay even with Anacortes or 80% of Anacortes. I want to make sure that we're bankrolling some money so that we can make those necessary improvements to stay competitive with those other marinas.
Right. We have, in addition to the age and condition of the marina facility itself and the infrastructure,
we also have some locational limitations that we can't overcome. And we don't have the uplands areas to expand into like many port districts do. They have support facilities for marina activities, chandleries, restaurants, you know, overnight accommodations, all that kind of stuff helps pay the bills. We're bumped up against the Navy fence, and we really have limitations as far as what we can do down there. So that's part of the thinking of discounting our rates 20% from the market. It's an arguable number, but that's our attempt to make our mortgage rates attractive to people that would, you know, if we were on par with Cap Sandy or Lacana or something, they could go there and enjoy all those perks and benefits. And you know, we want to serve the local communities, but we also need to make some money. But more directly, to answer your question, this budget does very little in terms of accumulating funds for major capital improvements or projects. For that, we've identified a number of projects. There are grant requests out. Frankly, those processes are very long-term in nature, and the projected success of those grants is probably very low. So it's a rock and a hard place kind of situation where we're limited by the market and what we can charge, and at the same time rely on the talents of Chris and his great crew of people to fix things, keep the costs down, run around, take care of business. And then just in the past, well, like last year, we ended the year, the gross revenue is about $1.7 million, as I recall. And all-in expenses were about a little less than $1.5 million. So there's a couple $100,000 worth of difference between revenue and expenses. There was a wild card number in there of 25,000 or so, maybe a different number of that for some reimbursement from insurance claims that happened in prior periods. So anyway, we're still in a fairly small, I hate to use the word gross profit or net profit because it doesn't apply in this case, but our net revenue is in the couple $100,000 range, and we just accomplished that over the last couple of years based on following, you know, pricing issues and improvements, and we're at or near full capacity right now with the slips. There are empty slips down there, but somebody's paying rent on most of them. We have some slips that are not well suited to current market. Some of those go empty, and we have some plans to make some improvements that would allow us to increase our revenues. But you know, I'm rambling a little bit, but it's a complicated subject. Sure. So we're not making a ton of money. We're trying to eke out what we can to pay the bills and maintain the facility, but not much more.
Well, and I guess my thought on it is I very much value that resource, as I know the community does. So trying to be proactive to squirrel away some for the next major improvement, and I know you guys are thinking about that. One last thought, dovetailing off Councilmember Allenberg's thoughts. Obviously, the parking, the launch fee is voluntary. I mean, it's essentially voluntary compliance.
An honor system.
An honor system. I think a great big red and white sign, and a camera. Cameras are cheap. You could go right over to Stephanie, right? An Arlo camera could beam over there so she can see. Just a smile. And it helps with safety too. I mean, you know who's down there then, but just smile. You're being recorded. There's a $10 launch fee. Might help with some of that voluntary compliance. That's all. Thank you, man.
Anyone else? I appreciate the work that the Marine Advisory Committee does. I know that you spend a lot of your time, and definitely appreciate that, Ken, and to the rest of the committee. So, thank you, Chris. Okay. We will then move on to engineering. TIB grant, convert Puget Sound Energy street lights to LED. Looks like we have our city engineer and development services director back. Welcome back, Kathy. Welcome, Jim Bridges.
Thank you. Is this on? So January 17th of this year, we were notified from the, via letter from the Transportation Approval Board that we had received a grant in the amount of $220,000 for a program they call Relight Washington. This is not a grant that the city sought out. This is a grant that TIB works with the utility companies to identify utility-owned streetlights to upgrade them to LED fixtures. Unfortunately, public utilities can't accept the TIB funds, so they have to come through a local agency, and we are the local agency. So this is a pass-through grant from TIB, Transportation Approval Board, to the city of Oak Harbor for $220,000 to reimburse Puget Sound Energy for their work, and I believe it's 627 lights that are going to be upgraded to LED. It's a no-cost grant to us. We're not involved other than signing the paperwork. With that, I can stand for questions.
Councilor Allenberg.
Thank you. Mr. Bridges, when they change these lights, these lamps they're changing lamps or the whole head, the whole structure?
It's not clear. Again, we're not involved in the process, okay. Whether it's a whole head or just the lamp itself.
Do you happen to know if they are the LEDs are going to be like the color tone of HBS? Or are they going to be the white or the blue lights?
To be completely honest with you, I didn't read the grant application or what was sent out by Puget Sound. They do have some fact sheets in here. It's a whiter light that is easier for the human eye to distinguish details and colors.
So some of the blue light is very harsh, and it doesn't really make the neighborhood look very nice. In fact, it looks like a prison yard.
Again,
the photo doesn't really tell me anything. I'm just curious if it has the hue of like high pressure sodium, which is a much softer.
I don't believe so. I think it's more crisp light. I don't believe these would be the soft lights. That's just my opinion. It says the light color is better for nighttime visibility, so that's going to.
Which that versus this. This is the new. Okay, that answers my question.
That's all I can say.
Councilor Servadius.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, when we rewind to the Amoresco grant that we got, that I think did a lot of ours on 20, it's noticeable. If anyone tonight drive down the street, you can spot. And in my own home, I like the more yellow light. I appreciate that. But on the streets, if you see, I mean, it was stark, the contrast, but stark in a good way when they put these LEDs in. And you'll spot the ones that haven't been converted. It's a pale yellow. I mean, it's significant, the difference in how ineffectual the lighting is, not to mention the cost savings once they make the conversion. So I don't know if we had in the packet here, does it tell us all of the locations? Do we have a breakdown of that?
We don't have that
information. I mean, obviously, if it's not costing us, that's even better.
But these are only the lights that are owned by PP&L. I believe the city has redone all of their own lights that they own themselves. So these are just PP&L owned lights. There's
PSE, right?
Yeah, PSE. I'm sorry.
I knew you were coming from.
So PSE owned lights. There's no energy savings to the city for installing these.
Okay.
This is strictly going to benefit Puget Sound.
Okay, but I know as you drive out of town, headed south past Scenic Heights and then Capitol, there's a couple in there that you'll spot, and I hope these are included because they stand out like sore thumbs, the ones that weren't converted. So you'll notice them. Thanks.
Anyone else? Yes.
Can I talk about that sore thumb for just a minute? There are LEDs that have different color prisms to the bulb. Some of them have a warm light to it, not necessarily HSP, and I think you're just thinking of some of the older high pressure sodium lights that we had out here. I'd be really curious to see how they're going to match this up in terms of the color tones. If it doesn't make any difference in cost, why not make it a difference in beauty?
I'm not going to argue with that or have a counterpoint to it. I'm a civil engineer, not an electrical engineer. I don't know all the refractions of the light, so.
We have an expert right here.
I'm a bit of a light geek.
A number guy and a light geek.
The hue you're looking for is about 2,700 on the Kelvin scale. I'm guessing these are going to be about 5,000, which is what they put in. The real bright lights you see on the cars are about 6,000 on the Kelvin scale. But you're looking for 2,700, you're probably going to get $5 grand. Bright white.
Go back to your computer.
Anyone else? Any other questions or input?
It's going to be scheduled to be on the upcoming council agenda.
Okay.
For approval.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we will, I think, now move on to what we were going to do in the beginning of the meeting. And Mr. Olborn suggested that I think we're going to be trying to do this at pretty much most of our workshops. And I appreciate this because I think it's a way to just keep us more focused and certainly let council have a better opportunity to understand what we're doing. And I won't try to steal any of your thunder except to tell you that you do not have to make it last until 5 o'clock if you don't want to. Go ahead.
All right. I think this is a good opportunity to just kind of give a report to you, a lot of things that I'm working on and a lot of things that staff are working on. And bi-monthly, I don't think it's too hard for us to do this report. So if all goes well, we'll probably continue to do this report. And I know some of the input I've had with council that, oh, I didn't know you were working on that. I didn't know you were working on that. So this is a good way to do that and put it into report. So I start off with the things, since I'm writing the report, the areas that I'm working on. Windjammer grand opening, certainly I'm very involved in that. We've got a staff committee together kind of brainstorming the ideas. You mentioned earlier, and you got it in writing now, that we're targeting the June 22nd, Saturday 2019. We're figuring that this is the only event. We're putting a lot of emphasis on the splash park involved in the opening, and then we're working on an outline that I will come back and present to you in the March workshop. It kind of talks about all the things, and so I think Councilmember Munns has suggested some things, and so we've taken some of those things, but any suggestions, certainly feed them to me or my assistant, and we'll take those considerations as we come up with the outline. One of the areas we wanted you aware of, and the time we kind of got to move on that area, let's just take all around, is the Splash Park naming contest. So we've got some help here by Enviro Issues. I'm doing that process here, kind of laid out a good time frame. We'll get into more specifics when I present. This is presented next month. This kind of gives you, we're going to have to start the process really soon, so that's why we're bringing it up now. I think it'll bring a lot of exciting emphasis to the opening by having a naming contest, and it'll culminate as with the name for the Splash Park being announced as part of the grand opening on June 22nd. So we talked already about the excitement there with all the areas, with all the people you can see behind the fence, but we're going to get the fences down for the opening. There may be some of the park that won't be open. Hopefully we'll try to get as much, at least the non-grass areas open for the grand opening, and certainly the plaza area where we're going to focus on is all asphalt, not a big deal there with the grass issue, and really with the school opening there's a lot of emphasis, and with the fences going down, and there's going to be a lot of curiosity and a lot of emphasis on the park. So we'll focus on that, and we'll just make this the one big event. We won't have anything going on, but the goal was to remove all the fences for the July 3rd and July 4th so people could see the fireworks. But we don't anticipate any events going on. We're going to focus on this June 22nd grand opening. So, any comments on that before I go on to next one, legislative outreach. Mayor and I think one of the council members were going to participate in the AWC days, but it got canceled due to the weather. So I just want to call attention to the AWC lobby date for March 25th in Olympia. So council members are encouraged to see if they can attend that date, and certainly staff can help you with setting that up, reservations. So fortunately, the week before the failed event, I was able to go to the legislative action days for the parks, and I was able to play an active role in advocating with all 3 of our legislators in District 10 for funding our youth athletic field grant for $350,000. And I mentioned that we just missed the threshold of cutoff and ranking. So, and I think the mayor's had some follow-up with Dave Paul on doing that, and we'll certainly continue to outreach and encourage them to do that. And I'll talk about a little bit in more detail right in my report, but the Navy connection and the SR roundabout are some of the things that I think we should probably additionally add to it. We do it on the second page, and I put a sample in here of the report. We really didn't want to mess with this 6-page thing. It did really well, the 6 items we're looking at, but we got a second page for the project, for priority projects, and focusing on the naval and then the SR-20 Swantown. It's scheduled for 2027, but I really think I would recommend the council make it a priority to lobby to get that increased up, or just have a development it's going in right in that area, and the deal, it's a good time to, if it was going and they were requiring to be able to take advantage of that. But with this project just being on the planning, or just on a long-term planning, it's really nothing that the DOT can really know exactly what's going to go there. So it's kind of frustrating, and we've been talking to Steve, we've been reserving right-of-way for 20 years for a project that hasn't been built yet. So I really think that needs to go forward at a certain time, and it's probably a good thing for us to lobby along with the other things that we already have done. Moving on to the Arts Commission, I'm playing an active role in the Arts Commission. I have some experience where I came from in dealing with artists, and the Development Services Department wasn't too disappointed when I agreed to take on that. And fortunately, I have a lot of help from my assistant, Lisa Felix, and helping me and really getting them on track and taking on some really good, exciting initiatives. So one thing that was kind of left undone was the finishing up on the oak leaves and putting in the landscaping, and so that's going in as soon as the weather cooperates. So I know the school district has inquired about that, so that's moving forward. There is some code amendments we talked about earlier with the lack of flexibility, and for some reason the fund was written as acquisition and maintenance, and so I'll be bringing back at the council at the March workshop a proposal to expand the usage of what we do for Arts Commission, where we can do more educational components rather than everything being on acquisition and maintenance. So that's coming forward. Acorn Art Sculpture was outlining in the report in 2014, I think, when the post office came down, and for some reason it never went forward, but in picking up, and Lisa's really going to help me with outlining all these projects and what we need to go forward. So we picked that up, and that's moving forward, and that will come to you at an upcoming workshop. Moving on to another initiative we talked about when we bought some art, that we would look at pursuing a sculpture park. So I've got that, doing some negotiation and a relationship with the chamber and the school district, and hopefully that's targeted for coming to you at the April workshop. And then I think the last one on the Arts Commission is the Creative District. Is a new initiative through the state. It's kind of like a Main Street program, but it's focused on creative arts economy. And I've got that targeted for the April workshop too. So that's kind of dependent upon your March liking to amend the code and become more flexible, where we could fund more of the programs rather than just acquisition and maintenance of art. Moving on to Main Street, I've had experience in Main Street in 3 of the 4 W states. So been in Main Street, West Virginia, Main Street, Wisconsin, and now in Main Street, Washington. So, so I played an active role in the design committee and the economic revitalization committees. Some of the areas that the design committee is working on that I'm working with staff on addressing is design guidelines. They've kind of submitted some proposals. Staff is working it through, and I put a target date. We envision somewhere between around June of 2019 of us bringing that to the council for or bringing it through the process. I think it goes through probably the plan commission and a variety of stuff. So Steve's got the process down here, but I wanted to, and it gives them kind of dates so they know where we're going to with this process. So, the highway, they wanted to pursue some highway, some changing in the highway wayfinding signage. And so as part of that, to go and put their emblem on the signage, it really needs to come in as a logo. So they're going to submit a proposal for us to adopt the Main Street as a city logo, and then it'll fit into our whole issue, and then they can redo the sign with their new logo, the signing through the city. And then also with the logo, they want to do a large entrance sign where the licensing is. So it kind of has the entry to the downtown there, and so it needs the same thing with the logo being adopted, and then it won't be counted towards private signage usage, and that's what the property owner is very concerned with if he pursues that signage. So, so we've kind of got a process in place. And then the Historic Preservation Commission is coming along. I think it was very important to the Main Street that they have the ability to do local government designation, and so we anticipate that in March 2019 the Historic Preservation Commission will have the ability to do that local designation, and that has some tax implications, so people can get tax credits on having that, and so it's a little easier, and I think it's a lot of people prefer, rather than going through the state designation or the federal designation, to go through the local designation, and by having a Historic Preservation Commission, they can do that. And then lastly, there's just some cleanup stuff with the serendipity. So any questions on Main Street? Moving on, economic development. I think I kind of mentioned this a little bit. The Opportunity Zones, a federal program put out by the president. I think it came out in November 2018. Relatively new. Started some partnership with the Economic Development Council of Island County in doing the marketing and education on this tax incentive for economic development, and we anticipate sometime in the spring this year that they'll do a workshop and really advertise it and have some experts in there and kind of encourage it to the area. The district is 2 of our census, I believe, that qualified, one census that qualified for it. It's basically 20 and the triangle of 20 and Midway going down, and then it left out the undeveloped property in the downtown. For some reason wasn't in that census area, but there's still quite a lot of area in there that could qualify, and we'll do our best to educate people of the potential of this program. And it has a potential of curtailing 2 to 3% of the cost by reducing the cost of a business with this tax credit. So it's not a huge benefit, but it has some benefit, and some projects that may be on the borderline that might be able to push it over where it makes it economically feasible to pursue in that area. And then creative districts, I already covered that. That also has an economic benefit too. Broadband, doing a lot of discussion with the Port of Coopville that's trying to lead the county initiative for a $50,000 study. They were looking for, I think, $16,000 in matching funds, and so the city, the mayor and I, using our economic development and our $30,000 authority, have told them that we'll do 5,000 and you need to go get partners, so they're hitting up the other, the county and the other municipalities for fundings to do that. I don't think it was appropriate for us to pay it all of their matching funds that they need, but certainly part of that. And then Coopville would do a lot of the administrative for this grant study, this analysis that would help us to study study broadband, and I know that was one of our initiatives before I got here, and it still remains, and so I'm moving ahead in that initiative and utilizing them as a vehicle in doing that. The Council of Governments, this is the issue with the SR20 Swantown roundabout. I advocated that to be put up as one of the five top ones out of the probably 30 projects that we have, highlighting that. And so then also I talked about earlier in suggesting that we advocate that to our legislature to push that up in the time frame to get it done. Moving on to clean water facility, the Navy connection. We do have the expanded version, the 2-page flyer on to seek state and federal funding. So certainly look that over. We're going to utilize that in the trip to Washington and also into the legislature. We have kind of like the consolidated version, the half-page version with the 2-page, and then we have the more expanded 2-page version to talk about that initiative and see if we can get help with the connection and overcome one of the probably major obstacles that's going to be involved in the conveyance system from the Navy to get them connected to us. And the study that's going on for the rate analysis, I believe it's the 30% meeting is tomorrow. So we're moving ahead on that project. And then
Blaine, I had a question about that. You just mentioned the 30%?
We're calling it, yeah, they're getting up to the level where they feel like they're around 30%, so they call it the 30% meeting.
So
it's kind of an engineering
that's
thing.
HDR is
HDR,
up. They're now up to 30%.
Yeah. So
not quite a third of the way to getting their final report. Yeah. When do they expect to have that, or when?
What we anticipate is sometime in April we'll brief the council. So we do have the calendar. It might move a little, so I didn't want to put a particular date in there. So we decided we'll just put April. So I'm kind of giving you an idea of when you can expect it. And so it's on target for the April date. And so unless we come up with some hiccups with the Navy, we think we'll do that. We've had our initial meeting, went very well, and we'll see how this meeting goes.
So the meeting tomorrow is with the Navy and HDR?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's a milestone, so I think we have a number of meetings in the milestone, and this is one of the milestones that we look at. Everything seems to be on track. So hopefully we'll continue, and I'll continue to update you on it.
I have a question.
Yeah.
If I may.
Go ahead.
A couple of questions here, Mr. Avon. Said that it's a 30%, HDR is 30% finished with their rate. I've been hearing, and even as of one of our previous meetings, not the last one with wastewater, but the one before that, the end of February was going to be the delivery date of the rate study. If I go back even before that, we were going to have a rate study by the end of 2018, but we didn't know all of the costs. HDR didn't have all of the costs. We didn't have all of the final costs for the wastewater treatment plant. We're down now to something below 5%. Why are we keep pushing this forward? That's my one question. I'll wait for you to answer that.
Okay, so you're talking about two different things.
Okay.
You're talking about the rate study for the city's rates,
right.
The city utility rates, and I believe Patricia has had conversations or communications with HDR to have them take the numbers that we have, because as you saw at your last council meeting, there's about $7 million left in the project.
Right.
So do you want to speak to kind of the time frame for that part of it?
So I updated HDR with all of the actuals that we had. We still have some closing interest for 2008, but I also updated them with 2019 and 20's budget, as well as the 6-year capital plan for all the utilities. So they have all of that data now, and he has it, and he's having Josiah input it into the system, and then he'll be sending us a proof copy to look at. I've asked him to get me a date that he can come to council so that we can hopefully take some action on what he recommended when he was here before.
So what we're talking about 30%, we're talking about all of the utilities.
No, we're talking, I'm only talking about the Navy connection study, and then Miles telling what this Navy.
So the next topic, the other topic, is we have this agreement with the Navy to develop a rate structure for them to come and connect their system to our clean water facility. And so there's the cost of treatment, the cost of taking capacity of our plant, and then there's also the cost of the conveyance system to get to us. So what we've done so far, and that contract is with HDR, but Carollo is the subcontractor to HDR. And what we're going to specifically be talking about tomorrow is kind of where we're at with the conveyance system, because we got to get tentative agreement on that conveyance system before we start talking all of the costs. So we're not going to share any real cost information with the Navy tomorrow. It's really the technical engineering stuff on how they would get their flow to us at a high level. We're at the 30%. And then we've always agreed, and we told the Navy that before we can give them any rate information, a rate proposal for them to connect to our system, we have to get that approved by council. And that's what Mr. Oborn was talking about when he said we will bring those numbers to council in April. So there's two different things. There's the city utility rate analysis, and that includes more than just wastewater.
Sure.
That was all 4 utilities, which Patricia's been working with HDR on. And then we're moving forward with this other contract that we have with HDR to respond to a request from the Navy.
So meetings like the one you're having tomorrow is not a preliminary negotiation.
No.
It's just a information
It's a check-in.
check-in.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. That answered my question. I thought, man, this thing is flying by right here.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. We can move on.
It caught my attention. Thank you. Kathy.
Yes, thanks, Kathy.
The next one is development services. I think we talked about through the budget process looking at permit fees, so that's scheduled to come in March workshop right now on our issue. And just for attention, the department also gave us some support for the opportunity zone with Ray attending a training class on that subject matter. The fire department ladder truck is now in Wisconsin since the 18th, and the preliminary reports that come out right now really look positive. So we still haven't got the numbers yet, but all the analysis that they've had coming forward really look promising, and we anticipate the chief anticipates giving you an update at the March meeting with having the actual numbers and additional costs that might be there, but it all looks really good. There was always a chance that maybe something would be on, and there still could be. I guess I'm not going to let it here, but all the initial analysis that they have and the information they're providing the chief looks good so far. Moving on to human resources. One of the initiatives that the HR department has really been working on is NeoGov and automating or putting onto a system the annual review process. And I know it takes out the paper a lot and really makes a good key area where it comes to. It's kind of like our agendas, what we do for the system, where different people can do the review and you put it all into a system that does it, and then it has a really good monitoring for goals. So, and that's what I really want to focus on, and this just really fits the initiative of being goal-oriented and being able to record and track goals for employees. And I think we have goals for employees, it goes for the whole organization that has goals. So it's a really good initiative. I appreciate the effort of the HR department and all the staff in learning this system. It hasn't been, it's a good system, it's just a little, not always intuitive, but certainly once you get used to it, and, it works through, and it has a lot of benefits, and so they've already used it for the hiring and a few other processes, but this was a good initiative and a good addition to the city, and strengthening our review and evaluation process. So, and then another thing that the HR has kind of been the initiative on is the Kaizen, or the Lean process improvement study, and this was kind of done before me, and we kind of dropped it, but we're picking up again, is looking at our site plan process, and having staff from development services and from public works really look at the process. It's a whole week-long process, and I've given you kind of a study in here that goes through. It's part of their Lean Academy, and through the office, through the state auditor's office, local government performance center, and the price is really good because it's cheap. A consultant could be thousands of dollars to do this week-long study. So really to dissect the process, get a lot of input, and then develop a kind of a framework of how we can streamline the process and do it better. So we're hoping that we're using that one site development, but we're hoping it transfers to some of the other processes that we have too, in improving the streamlining, and then the communication between staff, different departments, and going through that application process. So it's a really great initiative. They anticipate probably doing that week-long. They hasn't scheduled it, that week-long analysis process, sometime in May and June. I'll keep you up to date on that, and there may be some opportunity for some input on that, from outside input that we might get as part of that process. Moving on to police department, I'm just going to say here, negotiation with various counties for the jail are going forward. Chief's doing a really good job of looking at options there. Unfortunately, Iron County doesn't look like an option, but I think there's other counties out there, and we're looking at options. And unfortunately, really seemed good to us, but unfortunately, the county has other ideas, and so we're looking at trying to get out of the business of being the smallest jail in the state. But we'll see how that goes, and we'll continue to keep you updated on that process. The parks are moving to Public Works. The Parks Department created, and I attached it in here, a 2018 year-end report. And so they passed it out at the parks. You've probably seen it already, you being the liaison on that committee, but I thought it would be a good idea to include it in my report, so it's in the report there, the Parks report. When the council members already kind of called attention to it. It's a good list of all the activities that they've been doing for the year. I'm not going to go into detail on that, but certainly it's a good reading there and some good information I think the council should be aware of. Moving on to the SR20 and Banta Road, we actually have a start date of March 4th for construction for that project. So the mayor and I were at another meeting today, mentioned that it's road delays and it's going to be an issue. They'll do their best on that, but it will be an issue similar to Sharp's Corner is what they kind of analogized it with. It's going to be some disruption there with that construction on that interchange there. And then moving on to the senior center, they did have a new hire, Anita Joseph. So we're glad to have her on board in that department. And this is the last meeting for at 2 o'clock. We're starting next month. We'll go to the 5 o'clock meeting as directed by the council. One of the adjustments in it, we did do the employee introduction because it's not going to be in work hours. We may have to adjust that process there. And then, like I said before, I plan on making this a monthly event at the workshop. I think this is a kind of more casual format to do it rather than council. So, and then I'll try to put it in writing. I think it's just easier to disseminate that way than just throwing out a lot of verbal information like I might have done in the past. So, anything else?
Councilor Larson.
Thank you, Mayor. I talked about this earlier. I just want to say it again. I read this and I was like, this is phenomenal, this report. It's a real great snapshot of what are we doing, what have we been doing, what have we accomplished, what are we working on. When people say, where are my tax dollars going? We can just hand them this report. It's really comprehensive and it puts everything in perspective. So lets us know what's going on all across the spectrum of the city. So thanks for this report.
Yeah, and you brought up one of the issues I didn't have on there was the rate increase. I'll add that kind of a status on that monthly as that come forward, and if there's other things, other initiatives that you don't think of, let me know. And if you ask, then other people are interested too. So certainly there's still a lot on here that we're doing that's not in here. But certainly we're open to comments and open to input of items you would like to see and like me to kind of just briefly update you on. Thank you.
Councilor Allenberg.
Thank you. And also I wanted to compliment you on this thing, on this report also. When I work with Mike Nortier at the Island County Transit, he provided every meeting a report very similar to this. It really helps the communication for us to understand, number one, where we're going, number two, what we've accomplished, and it gives us a chance to go back and reflect on some of these things. So thank you for taking the time to do this.
Councilor Cervati.
Just did want to echo those comments. I do have a council member comment when we get to that point, but thank you. This is very helpful and informative to have in one snapshot, and probably monthly is a good format. So.
Okay. Yes, Mayor Brooke.
This helps a lot, Mr. O'Brien. In the Main Street, looking at that, and you have revised downtown guidelines targeted. When I questioned if maybe we need to review our CBD, what we allow in our central business district, when I went back and I'm poring over it, there were a couple of projects that have been approved downtown that were not in our list. And so I think that if it's not in our list, then maybe it should come to council for a discussion, or whatever. One was the rehab facility, which went around from all kinds, from medical to drug rehab or whatever, and it was right on Pioneer Way. And everybody in the city just got up in arms. And I assumed it was in our list. I didn't go back and look, but I've anyway gone through there. And I just think that I know other cities for their downtown are a little more restrictive, and I don't see why we can't be. And I would think Main Street might also have some ideas. I mean, if we combine, I mean, get the players.
Yeah, this is their ideas. They submitted some ideas to us for design. So staff's working it through. That's why I put it under the Main Street. So their design committee came up with some design guidelines for us, and we're working it through our system here of analysis, and we'll work it through our process and take it through and vet it through the Plan Commission and the City Council on if you want to implement these additional guidelines that they recommended.
Which would also be what type of businesses are permitted for downtown.
Steve's going to help me
There
out.
actually, if I may, the two different thoughts.
Okay.
Mr. O'Rourke, the things that we have from Main Street right now are design guidelines for the exterior appearance of structures. I think what you're talking about are the permitted uses list. Is that okay?
Yes.
Certainly, there are a lot of different ways that cities can do that. A common way, which is what we use in all our districts, is there's a list of uses. And then the director has the ability to interpret the code when things don't fit exactly. You have lists of the conditional uses, which require a conditional use permit. You could also include a list of prohibited uses. So maybe that's something that we might want to entertain. It might be a little cumbersome to have council involved in approving particular uses. You might want to think of a similar way to do that. But I think there are lots of different tools that we could look at. So I would, a short story, I think I would envision that as a separate effort for us, but it could parallel the one that is already underway.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just think we need to, we were trying to be streamlined, and maybe we made the streamline too much, and then permitted uses, which didn't seem to fit our downtown with a medical facility on Main Street when we're trying to get people to buy and shop and have coffee and meet their friends and art galleries, and you have a medical facility which doesn't seem to really fit.
In that particular
So-
example, I would propose probably the better way for us to do would be to create a list of uses that we don't want to see in
Okay.
the downtown. Because I think we do have some down there now that have proliferated, that
Yes.
perhaps for a variety of reasons are no longer the direction that the community might want to go. And so we have that in some of our other districts. There's some, specifically we say you can't do this, 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 or this in this zoning district. And that might be a great way to solve that particular problem. So I think there are a couple of ideas.
I just don't want it to be dropped. So we're reviewing things. We need to be slowly. I don't expect it tomorrow, or but just slowly keep going. Thank you very much.
And I'd love to follow up with you off, as they say, offline.
Okay, all right, yeah, whatever. Thank you.
Anything else on city administrator report?
No, I just thank staff for kind of backing me up. I don't have all the answers. I'm kind of jack of all trades, but expert at none. But certainly I'm glad I have a lot of expertise here to bring to the table and all work together as a team improving the livability of this community.
Thank you, Blaine. Okay. Council comments. Mr. Servedius.
Thank you. Two quick things. I'd like to thank our assistant in the lighting department today, Mr. Powers. But I would make a request as my eyesight continues to leave me. Maybe no more PowerPoints, white font on light blue. Do we make a staff recommendation across the board? Just black on white is fine. Big letters.
I made a note of that too.
I'm not sure we started that trend, but hey,
you really are a lighting expert.
But I appreciate his awareness there and jumping in. The other thing I wanted to clarify was my comments on gambling. I sat here and thought about those. But I just want to say where that a little background, because I help people invest their money. I'm often asked, or I consult people when I'm going through a budget and they're $20 here. It usually happens with the lotto. And I tell them that the lotto is basically a tax on idiots. And I do say that often in my career, so I stand by those words. But the background on that is you would be much better off investing that money soundly over a period of time, and you'll be much better off. And so when we talk about gambling and the taxing of those activities, my concern truly is the people sometimes that are, I worry that the people that are least likely or able to part with that discretionary income might be the people that are participating in those activities. So that was the clarification on that. Not calling anyone who gambles an idiot. If you do it purely recreationally and you can step away from it, that's great, but just keep it at a purely recreational level.
A follow-up on it. Hit 5 is really a good one. I know, and it's a voluntary tax on those who need remedial math.
Awesome. It was only a $1 ticket to $5.
Okay, any other council comments? Okay.
That would be accused of being a gambler.
Seeing none, we will adjourn this meeting at 4:42. Thank you very much.